July 10th, 2025. Just before dawn, the jungle breathed out fog like smoke from a wound. Then the quiet shattered. Columns of armored steel rolled out of the tree line while high above, shapes without sound crossed the canopy. More than 2,000 U.S. special operators moved in concert with stealth drones and heavy armor toward a place most maps refused to admit existed. Their target was not a village, not a camp, but a machine, an empire feeding on drugs, weapons, and human lives. Run by two American brothers, Lucas and Jared Stone. Let's uncover the truth. By sunrise, the ledger had flipped. Over 3,000 cartel gunmen were dead or in restraints. More than 2,000 civilians were pulled from holes in the earth, from cages behind steel doors, from rooms that smelled like bleach and fear. Some had tags on their wrists for surgery they would not survive. Others were bound for brothels and auction blocks across oceans. The rescue was real. The numbers were real. The question everyone asked was harder. How did the United States strike an empire this big with such precision that no hostage and no American soldier died? What was buried in that jungle that made Washington treat criminals like an army? What did the Pentagon find that demanded war-level violence? To answer that, you have to stand in the Darién Gap, where Panama bleeds into Colombia and the ground itself tries to kill you. Here, in a cathedral of vines and mud, the locals had a name for the stone's domain: El Silencio, the silence. Because people went in and did not come back. El Silencio wasn't a compound so much as a living organism. 37 square miles of cut trails and sensor lines, of observation posts under leaves, of fake villages and real guns. The brothers, American-born former special operations, had built a private army north of 3,000 fighters. Recruits drilled to cadence, not cartel chants. They wore mismatched uniforms, but their formations were clean. Manuals learned by heart, movement like rangers, discipline drilled like Marines. They did not simply smuggle cocaine or rifles. They ran pipelines of human beings. More than 5,000 souls disappeared into their system. Some were rerouted to forced labor sites that never saw a sky. Some were marked for organ harvesting. Documents assigned organs, surgeons assigned time slots. The worst stories ended in the Golden Triangle, the marketplace no one wants to admit is still open, where children become product. From above, El Silencio looked like nothing. That was the point. The canopy hid everything. Machine guns on pivot mounts, shoulder-fired missiles resting like snakes, armored carriers tucked under netting. Snipers owned the angles. Ground radars mapped anything heavier than a man. Converted fishing boats with welded gun mounts patrolled river arteries and escorted shipments out to deep water. Helicopters swept the periphery with men hanging from open doors. Every line of approach was mined, booby-trapped, watched. The United States had tried, and it had bled. Between 2021 and 2024, at least half a dozen covert strikes went in. Names that carry weight: Delta, SEAL Team 6, SAD, found they were hunting an enemy who had read the same playbooks and adapted them to mud and heat. In 2022, an assault pinned its hopes on speed in, speed out. Blackhawks crossed a ridge and died in a net of infrared triggers and shoulder-fired SAMs. Strela 2s likely smuggled from Eastern Europe. 19 U.S. operators never made it home. The next year, a 12-man recon element faded in the rain just 18 miles from the heart of the beast. Radios ceased. Beacons went dark. No bodies to bury. The terrain conspired. Sinkholes yawned 14 feet across and swallowed men. The canopy ate satellite signals. Humidity turned optics into milk. Even drones sweated here. Lenses fogged, servos gummed with silt. The stones took those advantages and wrapped them in something uglier. Human shields engineered into the landscape. Churches with hollow floors, schools with reinforced basements, clinics that doubled as armories. There were weddings staged with music and flowers to mask troop movements. Operators hesitated, counting faces. That hesitation cost them. Doors wired to explode. Farmers who were not farmers. A child crying as a lure. And then the ambush. The discovery that finally broke Washington wasn't a convoy or a satellite image. It was an image from inside. Two American children, 9 and 13, found strapped to gurneys among cold trays and bright lights. That was the line. After that, El Silencio stopped being a cartel hideout. It became a battlefield. The outrage was public, but the planning was quiet. A different kind of war took shape, one that married infantry to algorithms, steel to math. It was given a name: Operation Iron Justice. The order was not to raid, the order was to remove. 2,100 operators formed the spine of the assault. U.S. Army Rangers from multiple battalions, Marine Raiders trained to drop into fire, Delta Force elements for the cuts only they can make. They brought teeth, around 30 M1A2 Abrams tanks, 45 Stryker fighting vehicles, 12 M109A7 Paladin self-propelled howitzers that could put steel exactly where the map said a bunker lived. Offshore, 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers waited in blue water. In the sky, the revolution. The MQ-20 Avenger is a hunter that does not breathe. It sees what people cannot in light bands we don't have names for. It builds faces out of heat and movement and remembers them. Its processors can tell a rifleman from a farmer, a guard from a hostage, even under leaves and corrugated roofs, with accuracy that makes your blood run cold, 98.7% confidence levels against a backdrop of trees. Each drone was tied into Sentinel, a satellite web that scans and rescans the same patch of Earth in seconds, stitching heat signatures and metal echoes into a living 3D model. Not a map, a replica. Doors, beds, the way bodies move when they are free, and the way they move when they are chained. From the Caribbean, Tomahawk Block 5 missiles waited for coordinates they would adjust mid-flight if the world changed, if a child ran into a corridor, if a mother stepped into a courtyard. Their guidance could reroute around innocence. This was the promise: to split a hair in a hurricane. The battle space was carved into 32 grids. Each had its own watch. Drones overhead, satellites above the drones, and in a command center where the air was recycled and cold, teams wearing augmented reality visors watched biofeeds tagged to potential hostages. Tanks were tuned down to avoid overpressure in structures where people might be hiding. Even the artillery's blast patterns were pre-modeled against weather and walls. At exactly 3 a.m. local time, the first blows landed without sound any human ear could place. Communications nodes blinked off. Power bled away from towers disguised as trees. The first salvo of tomahawks struck deep. Armored doors sheared. Relay rooms caved. Hardened bunkers lost their lungs. 30 seconds later, the jungle lit at 4 points as Avenger payloads erased radar and counter-battery systems the Stones had hidden in sham clinics. On the ground, 3 Ranger battalions moved in low. Under electronic smoke, the drones laid like a second fog. Silent radios, infrared eyes. They breached outer trenches cut into clay and rolled through barricades of felled logs and sand. Abrams tanks nosed forward like beasts, reactive armor bristling, their main guns speaking in heat that turned bunkers into paper. From the north, raiders dropped from MH-60 Seahawks, ropes burning through gloved fists. They landed within a stone's throw of the prison blocks, mapped the night before in Sentinel's Ghost City. Teams blew hinges inward in flooded corridors. Doors went down in pairs. Names were called, gently at first, then louder. Within minutes, survivors staggered into the light, blinking, vomiting, crying without sound. The cartel fought like they knew there was no later. RPGs streaked between trees. 50 caliber guns turned openings into storms. Mines took bites out of the earth. But the U.S. advance was method, not madness. Javelin teams hunted armor with calm precision. Paladins on the perimeter dropped single rounds through ventilation shafts and into assembly points. Fire that left cinder where men had massed, and nothing where civilians had clustered. Every grid reported in. Every grid answered back. By the 12th minute, the prison blocks were secure. 2,019 people pulled behind a wall of rifles, 41 American citizens among them. Medics taped and stitched. Translators repeated the same 2 words over and over: "You're safe." By the second hour, resistance had collapsed into pockets and then into whispers. By 0600, the gunfire was something that happened far away. The numbers told a story of finality. 3,300 and change enemy fighters dead on the field. 728 captured alive, hands bound, faces blank. In a command bunker burrowed under reinforced concrete, the bodies of Lucas and Jared Stone were recovered, ruined by blast and weight. Forensics teams did the rest. DNA, dental. The chain of evidence closed. No American casualty reports. No funeral dates. No civilian dead. On the deck of a destroyer named for a president, a short message left as if this were routine. Objective cleared. All hostages secured. Resistance neutralized. El Cencio, which had looked eternal at night, was by morning a scar. 40-foot walls broken into rags. Tunnels collapsed like bad veins. Sensors that once tasted the wind lay in mud. The myth that geography and fear could protect atrocity died with the light. News moves faster than ships. Images hit the world. Children wrapped in blankets too big for them. Soldiers kneeling to speak at eye level. Stacks of weapons dragged from rooms that had been classrooms yesterday. For the first time, names attached to faces, faces attached to families. The Pentagon said little, but meant every word. There will be no sanctuary for monsters. Borders will not save you. If you sell human life, expect no mercy. The echo of that statement traveled across the Americas, across Africa, across Southeast Asia. Radio traffic changed tone. Command nodes went dark of their own accord. Cash burned. Hard drives hammered apart. Mid-level bosses pointed cars south and kept driving. Rumors said some fled toward the deserts, others to jungles even deeper. But rumors can't close the hole left when certainty dies. What the stones built had told criminals a story. Hide behind children, behind churches, behind corrupt men with pens, and you can do anything. That story collapsed in 3 hours. What happened in the Darién wasn't only tactical, it was doctrinal. For decades, nation-states treated syndicates like overgrown gangs, sent detectives to do soldiers' work, wrote subpoenas to arrest men who fortified like generals. Operation Iron Justice spoke a different language. It treated a syndicate like an insurgency and met it with the tools forged for insurgents. Satellites that read heat like handwriting, drones that distinguish fear from malice, armor that can thread around through a window and leave the room next door untouched. It was overwhelming force, shaped into a scalpel. There is a moral dimension people argue about in quiet rooms. Can you bring the machinery of war into the realm of crime and keep your soul? The answer, in this one place, was measured in numbers that matter. 0 dead hostages, 0 fallen Americans. Precision married to discipline. Firepower guided by rules tighter than any law book. Justice measured in meters and seconds, delivered not in fury but in refusal. To let another child wake under surgical lights. None of this erases the years before. The patrols that never returned. The operators whose names grew into legends because they didn't come home. The families who waited by doors that didn't open. The jungle keeps its own ledgers. But for once, the page turned the other way. What comes next is a larger question. Does this playbook travel? Somalia's coasts. Myanmar's borderlands. The basement prisons of Eastern Europe. Do satellites and drones rewrite the rules everywhere? Or was the Darién a singular answer to a singular horror? Do cartels learn new disguises, move their markets from flesh to data, from river routes to encrypted channels? The war in the jungle might spill into cyberspace, and if it does, the tools will change again. For now, one truth survived the smoke. El Cencio fell because the people who built it believed the world would look away. They believed distance was armor, that children could be shields, that the jungle would eat pursuit. They were wrong. A nation looked into the canopy and decided not to blink. If you traffic human lives, you are not a businessman or a boss. You are an enemy, and enemies can be found. In the night, through the leaves, across borders, under concrete. Found, fixed, finished. No warnings, no safe rooms, no myth left to hide behind. On July 10th, 2025, the jungle woke up and learned a new silence. The silence after the storm, when chains fall quiet, and a helicopter lifts, and a child breathes in air that belongs to them again.